ceremonious bath bomb to start the day. I'll let you do the honors. Give it a blessing and throw it in there. Turn the water nice and black.
Perfect. I like the aesthetic.
Thank you so much for being here. When I asked you if you'd like to be part of this, there was no hesitation from you. Matter of fact, I think you asked me the least amount of questions that anyone has ever asked me before just saying yes. Why did you say yes to this?
Funny enough, I knew you through Twitter before, and my brother-in-law has been on a previous season, and people have been saying like, whoa, this is a cool idea. Like men who take baths, this Nicolle girl, like she's cool, she's got a vibe. And we'd known each other from our time in the ice bath at Inward and had like a pretty cool connection. And, you know, I didn't want to be so brazen to be like, oh, I like what you're doing. Can I be on it? So I never said anything. You know, I just kind of was like, if it happens, it happens. And sure enough, 1 year after knowing you, no pressure or whatever, just kind of like, hey, I'm doing this thing. You want to be on it? And I was like, yeah. And funny, like the day before you asked me, one of our coworkers who had just started was like, we're talking about podcasts and different ways to get our message out there. And they were like, men who take baths, I love it. It's super vulnerable. It's really about emotions and like opening up. And so that was kind of the day before. And then you had messaged me the day after, and I was like, those synchronicities I always feel are kind of a sign. So absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Full body, yes.
How does it feel now that you're here in the bath?
Yeah, I was saying before, pretty interesting because I've done a lot of like speaking at work and podcasts, and I feel like really comfortable. And as soon as I got in here, first step is, okay, I'm going to get naked, and like, is it going to be in front of all 5 of you? Like kind of okay if it is, but like, are you going to leave? And then, okay, I'm naked, you know? And I kind of asked you, showed up like no bathing suit, no towel, just like, yeah, I'm assuming that's what it is. But, you know, I'm pretty comfortable with that. But then as I got in, I started, am I going to be able to tell my story? Am I going to be able to talk? There's a vibe of like, you're not wearing anything. You're fully open. It kind of reminds me of being in a sauna a little bit, but even like one layer deeper. So I feel like safe, but then vulnerable.
I just want to reiterate that there are absolutely no wrong answers. And we're talking about things like masculinity and the world we live in right now, the world as it's been, partly informed by Me Too, which is essentially right around the time that this project started, as a way to document the evolution of masculine psychology and male identity. That can all seem like a lot, but the through line and the most important part is your story, and you can't get the answer wrong, because it's a beautiful story, and that story has led you here to this moment being in the bath. So thank you. What does being a man mean to you when you hear that, as you currently know it?
I think that what comes to mind is like what I want being a man to me. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm like trying to be a dad, starting my family with my wife, who I love so much. And
which, by the way, by the time this interview comes out, you might be a father. So look right to the camera and say, hi, kid.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. I had a lot of fear around being a dad. And so I think what came to mind first is, you know, kind of early 20s was like the opposite of masculinity for me. So it was like this insecurity that led to, oh, I want to be cool. I want to be liked. I want to have things. I want girls to like me. I want to feel valued. And so it came from a place of insecurity. And so being a man was like being liked and being cool. And it's kind of the opposite of what being a leader actually is. And now as I, you know, run my company, a lot of people rely on me for like decisions and strategy and support. And then that's going to translate to a family. And so now being a man, I think is or what I want to be is more selfless, less like I need to put myself out there and achieve. And I think having a child will be the ultimate. It's not about me anymore. And so I think being a man is being, what I'd like it to be is being supportive to others, to allow them to enable their dreams, to take care of a family, to like give more than you take. And I think you can do that if you're fully confident in yourself, because you're not like asking, not needing. And so that's what I want, is like full self-love so I can support others.
how have you reached this point where you understand that to be a truth of masculinity for you, that it is about this selflessness? Was there a time where that's not what masculinity stood for you? Can you give an example at a period of your life or a time in your life where you maybe had to disavow this version of masculinity in order to be liked?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like elementary school, high school, you're kind of taught you want to be part of the group. You know, very few people at like 12, 16, 20, 24 are able to just be their authentic selves. It's like, what are people going to think of me? How are they going to judge me? And then you see, you know, male role models, action heroes, and, you know, someone who gets in fights like this. I'm strong. I'm an athlete. I'm like this kind of role model, at least for me when growing up, was sort of like, that's what it meant to be manly, meant to be tough. There was no talking for me in high school around emotions, but I always have been like soft on the inside. But I think I was afraid to let that out and share when I was younger. And so it was very much, you know, not confident in myself, not a lot of self-love, not confident to just like be who I am in the same way I am now. And like what led to that transition, I think around 30 was just challenges, maybe even before, like 28, 30, challenges with my career, challenges with addiction, and struggle, like failure for the first time, and starting to feel like, okay, I need to change. Like, what are my options, you know? And that change was, hey, I want to learn more about myself. And then learning more about myself, you kind of pull away all these barriers that you've put up, like, oh, I need to be tough, or, you know, kind of as you grow up, I find you have moments that create like fear and embarrassment and shame. And so you build walls and you become less of like that child, that authentic self. And so when you get older, it's like pulling away those barriers to really feel like who you are. And so the work I've done over the last 8 years was like, who am I really? And so I'm comfortable talking about, you know, high school and university, I had like a lack of self-love, and it was clear of like why I was striving for these things. And now as a result of like pulling those barriers away and feeling into those feelings, processing them, I think now it becomes like, okay, I want to support others. That's become more clear.
So it was essentially the challenges that you faced that then almost forced you to slow down enough to look at yourself. Is that then like what, if that's true, is that what taught you that this version of masculinity that you're now embodying was possible? Or was there something else?
Yeah, I think struggle always creates change, right? And we were talking about it early. And so like daily struggle, something as simple as like an ice bath, you were talking about it with pain, right? So when your life is very linear, it's you're not forced with the opportunity to change so much as when you face like challenges. So, you know, maybe you lose your job, you lose a family member, somebody betrays you, you know, go and like do an Ironman, or so things that like push you out of your comfort zone, I think create opportunities for change. And for me, it was primarily around like addiction and I think drug use, which like, you know, for 2 days I would disappear and I would kind of wake up and have this like massive amount of shame, like I don't want to do this anymore. And then that impacted my career, my job, my life. And so it's just at a point where like this isn't sustainable anymore, like this way of life, what you're doing, like why are you doing this? And so I started to kind of go inward. And so I think that's when my ideas of like masculinity and being strong, having integrity started to have a lot more value than when I was younger. It was just like being a good person, helping. When I was younger, it was like taking, you know?
It's interesting to hear you talk about addiction, because I do think that that's something that a lot of men struggle with, insofar as that it becomes just another way to avoid going inward. It sounded like you almost had this voice or this knowing that you weren't living in your purpose. What about for men who are so far into this, behind this wall that they've built, that they don't even hear that voice anymore? Like what is what is a step to even like imagine that it's possible that you could change?
Really good question, right? That's like what we're all trying to figure out, because I think for most men, especially in my generation, maybe in younger generations, it's starting to change. People are more emotionally aware. But if I said like, hey, how are you feeling today? What emotions did you feel? I think most people are like, I actually don't know. You know, did I spend my day grateful? Did I have compassion? Was I sad? Was I scared? Was I angry? These emotions are just like running in the background. So I think the biggest problem is people just don't understand how they feel, and they're never taught. And like, to go into your feelings, it's a practice. It takes work, right? And like therapy, where we're at right now is like, on the one side, the easiest, lowest friction is maybe there's like meditation on an app, you know, $10 a month, calmer headspace. Someone can use it at home, and it's a struggle. Most people are like, you know, I should, but I don't have time. Then on the other side, there's therapy, which is actually really hard to do. It's expensive, $250 a session. You have to find someone, be vulnerable with them. And it's like dating in a way, where the first one isn't probably going to be the fit for you. And then you have to bare your soul to this person. And most people are like, no fucking way. Like, I'm fine. So I think the biggest problem is just, how am I feeling really? And like practicing going in and like exploring feelings. And so what is like a step that someone can take? And to me, what worked for me was just like, okay, I had a reason. Like, things just weren't fucking going well. So I was like, I don't want to feel this way anymore. So I think for a lot of people, it's just like finding a reason powerful enough to change. And then for others, if you're like, hey, I don't want to change, there's a few things I've found that can give you state shifts. And what I mean by a state shift is like, you wake up, you have your coffee. Okay, average day, check your phone, 1,500 fucking messages. You know, it's like Discord and Slack and social media, and I have this to do for my kids. And what do these people think about me? And then like, you're in it, you're working all day, you're doing your tasks. Day ends, haven't like went internal once. That's an average day for somebody. Weekend comes, might be like, oh, I need to relax, bottle of wine, or, you know, night out, or whatever it is, to blow off some steam. And that's life. So I'd say your first step would be creating space to shift your state every day. And that could be an ice bath, like boom, immediately, norepinephrine goes up in the brain, attention, vigilance, I'm here, all my thoughts fade away. It could be some type of psychedelic experience where, you know, MDMA, psilocybin, ayahuasca, even as simple as like a legal ketamine treatment, where your thinking mind shifts, exercise, like running sprints, you know, doing art. Just, I would say the first step is giving yourself space to shift your state so that change can start. And then if you wanted to go deeper, it's like, okay, well, you know, maybe instead of this one ice bath, I'm going to go on an ayahuasca retreat, or I'm going to do some type of group ceremony, you know, or I'm going to go spend a week in nature without my phone. So there's like many, many, many ways, but all of them boil down to shifting your state and creating space.
And they're accessible. It's funny because when I totally hear what you're saying, and there's such a vast difference between waking up in the morning, checking my phone, and I can hear that voice calling out with so much wisdom, just asking the simple question, is this how you want to be spending your time right now? And sometimes I respond to that voice and I'm like, well, no, this is not how I want to be spending my time, but it's going to be how I spend my time anyway. And it's like, okay. And it just goes away. And sometimes I'm like, no, it's not how I want to spend my time. And then I change. But the more that I listen to that voice, the stronger it gets. And now it's just like, I don't want to check my phone in the morning. I don't even need the voice. I just know the difference between, and my days can look completely different on the outside, but there's a difference in how I feel if I take that time in the morning to meditate and stare at my window almost doing nothing, or free writing, which I find really helpful as well, versus, you're right, jumping into the river of demands and expectations and obligations with both feet right away before you've had a chance to even become a person. You've spoken a lot about checking in with feelings. That is something that we hear a lot, that boys were taught as children not to cry, not to actually show emotion. And I think that has impacted women as well, in that we can ask for men to show up and show emotion, but we haven't actually been taught either how to feel turned on by men who show emotion, and how to feel like we're still safe with that man, that even though he's showing emotion, that doesn't mean that he's unstable or can't be relied upon. Have you encountered this at all? The difference between, as you started to evolve, did the women that were attracted to you or the women that you used to be attracted to, was there ever a shift in that?
So a funny story, interesting one that just happened recently. And this is like my wife of, 5 years we've been together. And I'm like, we're very open. Like we've went and, done MDMA therapy together and 10-day retreats together. And I moved into her apartment actually 3 weeks into dating. Our first date, she met my grandma, we're very silly and close. And so we're watching The Notebook. First time I ever saw it was on Netflix. She's like, let's watch a romantic movie 2 weeks ago. I was like, okay. So we're watching The Notebook. And obviously I start crying. And it's a moment when the two characters are 100 years old and they're together. And I was just thinking about wow, how nice is that you spend an entire life together and you almost die. You want to die together. And it just kind of touched me and I start crying. And I was worried, even as close as we are, this is how deep this is for men, that what's she going to think of me if I start wailing? And I'm crying out of one eye, trying not to fully release into it. And then kind of crying, but embarrassed in front of my own wife that I don't want to fully release. So, and that just shows you how subconscious that is, right? That's how close that partner is to me. And there's still some fear. And then once I got into it, but those feelings.
You did start wailing?
Yeah, it was the mere wailing, but crying, kind of like a, and then just to be with her, watching, it was imagining us together at 100 and dying together. I've been thinking about death a little bit recently. And so, I think that's definitely there. It's just can she now rely on me? It wasn't anything about, is she going to be turned on? But there was just some embarrassment there.
Yeah. You mentioned that you have been thinking about death. That didn't slip under my radar. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, so interesting. You mentioned this idea of I wake up and this voice in my head and I meditate, and I've been in a period of 3 years of just working so hard, on our app, our space, and not being healthy. And I have a lot of these practices, but wake up, coffee, work all day in front of the screen. And I was okay, I want to reset. Mm-hmm. And so I went and did this retreat where I lived in a cave for 8 days, just complete darkness, alone. And they went every day they would deliver food through this little cubby at night, and one person would come to check on you. And so really intense experience. Imagine you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And so after about 5 days, you can't sleep. So you're just perpetually 72 hours just sitting in the complete darkness. And what's really interesting, again, I was talking about shifting state, creating space, is the normal stuff you think about day to day just fades away. And so it came up, especially because it was so dark and black. And I'm probably more than halfway through my life, especially your life seems to compress and move faster as you get older. And it was and it kind of the question you had about being a man, I was have I lived a good life? Was my life net positive for the world? And then what about my parents? How much longer do they have? How many more times am I going to get to see them? And then what happens? Being in you can't see your body, you can't see anything. It's a state of nothingness, and just feeling real fear of what happens when you die. And so it was a really powerful experience to kind of just you get so distracted, or I get so distracted day to day by just life. And so just sit and hey, it's finite. There's not, it's very short. It's halfway done, And so these feelings that in some ways are powerful. So they make me feel, okay, make it use to be grateful. There's a lot of gratitude when I came out of the cave. It was insane. In a 1 hour period, I watched the sunrise. I was smelling the ground. I could see so clearly that then the sun came over. First I could just see greens and browns, and then when the sun lit up in the sky, the blue hitting my eyes was just incredible sensation. So it's just fuck, life is amazing. So now I'm just trying as I'm back again in the grind of the day to day is just wearing down, when all the magic is if you can create space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. I feel like I saw the sun with you just there. It's very nice. you shared a story with me before we started recording of, a younger man you'd had a conversation with who essentially asked you, do you hang out with anyone younger? And you're like, oh God, I'm not the young guy. I am now being asked by men younger than me if I know or hang out with younger people. And I really enjoyed the train of thought that instigated for you, which was essentially like the transition that all of us will face, but men in particular, I wonder if it's visceral in the sense where so much of your value is placed on your ability to do and your body and your ability to produce, that transition from being a young man into another stage of life is deeply felt and maybe even more challenging. Can you talk to me a little bit about this transition that you're starting to experience of moving into another phase of masculinity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's like doing and being, and I'm like a doer, like I get up, I want to crank, I want to move, I want to do stuff, I want to make stuff happen. I have a lot of energy, and being has always been more challenging for me. And I think balance is important. And so I heard this really interesting, this guy, Jeff Warren, he's from Toronto, also a meditative legend. He teaches on Calm and 10% Happier. And he came by for a sauna, and he just became a dad. And we were like talking about it. And he was saying like two things that really stuck with me were, one was you become, instead of the main house, you're like now the wallpaper. And like whatever happens in your life, it just isn't as important. And so it felt more like you're transitioning from doing to being, because you're just now like there to support this thing you love more than yourself. And I think in my life, everything is selfish. It's like, how do I get better at work? How do I be healthier? How do I look better? It's very like even personal goals that are helping others. Like, how do I help others more? It's like not selfless. And I think having a child helps you make that transition to like what I said before, man. There's all this tying into like dad stuff, because that's like where I'm about to go. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that feeling of like selflessness, that fading back into like being the wallpaper. And like one thing he said, which I just think is interesting for the video that stuck with me, was like, when you're really present as a dad with your son or daughter, it's so amazing, but it's also so sad. And this goes back to the death, because in every moment it's so beautiful, but it's gone. And he's like, at first my baby could only like one finger around my thumb, then it's like holds my hand this way, then it can hold my whole hand. And those first moments, they're so beautiful, but they're gone forever because it's changing so fast. And so a lot of stuff for me lately about change, growing, evolving, and maybe once I'm a dad, it will become, okay, I'm here now, and like this is a new role, but there's a lot of transformation happening, hopefully into something that's like stronger. And then, I mentioned younger people, whereas instead I'm looking like my trainer and this kid last night, they almost feel the same age, and maybe I'll look like I could be a leader for this person, then I'm the same age as them. So yeah, you caught me in a transformational time.
Fancy that. You'll have a lot to reflect on at some point. There's a future Robbie that's going to watch this video and be like, man, you had no idea.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'm glad that this could be part of a time capsule for you. Are you the man you want to be?
I would say half and half. Like definitely there's been like huge, enormous growth from like, I'm not super proud of who I was in my early 20s, but like happy to talk about it, but like very, very selfish and insecure. And I thought that was normal. And I think a lot of people do. And in my friend group, same values. I think now there's a lot more self-love, as I mentioned before, but still selfishness, So what I'm doing now, sometimes we like, and so, for people listening, we have a business that provides space to shift state, like I was mentioning before. So I'll go in and have a sauna with somebody who maybe just went through a divorce or a breakup, and just give them space to share and to see how they feel like in the sauna and the ice bath creates safety, kind of like this bath, space to open up. And you watch like, wow, we just that person feels like significantly better now because they had a space to share and connect. And I see that and I feel great. I'm like, wow, we're building something amazing. But then there's part of me that's like, oh, we got to build like 50, like we got to win and we got to be the best company in the space. And it's like ego driven, and it's like scarcity, insecurity. So those deep fears from when I was young, despite working on them for 8 years and improving, they're still there. And so I think the next step is to like fully accept those pieces and just be more from a place of confidence and strength and like thinking about others first. And I'm like a long way from that, but if I can get to that, like feel fully confident in myself, I can serve others all the time, that would be like what being a man is, right? Like being a leader is, I think.
When you say that you aren't proud of things that you had done, are you able now, as you are, to send love back to that version of Robbie? Or is there still a hook in you somewhere where you feel a sense of shame for the things that you've done?
Yeah, there's probably still guilt and shame. And so, you know, some things like just cheating on past relationships and like, you know, infidelity, hurting feelings, like that kind of stuff, I think is really hard to get over. There's like, oh, you know, it's not something that I'm like thinking about daily, but definitely if I look back, it was like, oh, you know, I wish I didn't act in that way. So acceptance, I think, is challenging for sure. For like, if anyone looks back through their life, I'm sure there was moments of like anger or like intoxication, you know, things you did. I had trouble when I was, you know, from 14 to controlling like lust and urges and like making wrong, I guess even wrong like sexual decisions. And so it's just, yeah, there's like some shame around those experiences. Like absolutely.
How can men move through that, right? It's one thing to take ownership, right? That's part of the first step is awareness, even being aware that that was something that hurt somebody, taking ownership of that. But how can people heal through the shame of hurting others once they recognize that they had?
I don't know. What is a good, I'll throw the question back. Like what's recommended? I'm sure there's like some kind of recommended thing to do, but it, you know, for me, I guess it's, can you just be strong now? And so here's a good answer actually, is a lot of those former relationships and the way I treated like past girlfriends, you know, came back in like this one, I was like, I'm going to be so good to this person. I'm going to treat them with so much integrity right from the start. And now we're like 5 years in, and like never would I like raise my voice to her or yell at her or say something derogatory or like hurt her feelings. Like it's so important to me. And I started like, I didn't feel like I was that good of a person before we got together. I had like this, like all these like shame, we'll call it. And so I was like, okay, if I can just be good for this person, maybe it means I'm worthy of love. And the more I was like good to this person, the more I felt better about myself. So it was almost like the relationship was bigger than both of us. And by putting more into it, it like pulled more out of me. And at our wedding, I actually explained that and just started crying because I realized like it worked. It like transformed the way I felt about myself by being like really good for this person. So maybe if you're struggling and you're shameful, you can just say like, look, I'm going to start from today. What's done is done. And like pick one person. It doesn't have to be every interaction, every single person in the world, but pick like one person that your behavior can make you proud and like start there. And that seems to have been really transformative for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's good. We're good?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool.
Wow. What a journey.
Yeah. Those are hard questions. Right? Like, it's not like I'm like, holy shit, I was thinking back to like, just like some bad memories. And I was like, oh man, did I forgive myself for this? Like, what the fuck? Because you don't, I don't know if you've probably done stuff you regret. You don't like think about it all the time. But then if you're like put in the moment, like, just remember like I dated my first girlfriend for like 10 years and just remember like crying. And I was like, oh my God. Like,
but I think like I could feel that there was something in you that still, that was like a gem of wisdom that someone's going to hear and be like, that's the thing I needed. And I feel like it was that last thing, which is that like, just pour it into one interaction. Just start there, because all of this can feel so big and it can feel so complicated. And especially if someone is reconciling or like wrestling with their past and they're trying to make these shifts, when someone starts to wake up, there's all of that other shadow, right? Like that starts to be like, okay, you're ready. So let's look in this corner and let's look in that corner. And it can feel like a lot, but if you can remember that every interaction that you could have going forward, starting with the person at the coffee shop, starting with calling your mother, starting with your partner, whatever it is, that's going to reflect back at you. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of love.
Nice. We're really good. The questions were like really different than a normal, like they were like deep right from start. So it's, I had to like think about it, so hopefully that was okay.
I think it was perfect. It was perfectly as it is. It's like I said, a beautiful time capsule.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.